Hello. Thank you everybody for being here. Let's give a big round of applause to the UWSP School of Health Science and Wellness. We're excited to have you guys here for this event to talk about Boston Marathon, running, and all things related. I want to go over Thank you everybody for being here. Oh, that's me. Again, for the School of Health Science and Wellness. I want to go over quickly who has a booth out here, the people that you might have seen on your way in, and the people that you might get to talk to afterwards. We have YMCA with a table. If you're not familiar with our area, our YMCA offers a lot of fitness classes, events going on for youth and adults alike. Girls on the Run is here. They help support the mental and physical health of girls by building their confidence, meaningful relationships, and discovering the joy of movement. Wonderful Water Run is here. We are a half marathon, 10K and 5K that happens in Piffner every year. We donate back to local groundwater, agriculture, and promote healthy living and activity in central Wisconsin. Pinery's Running Lab is here. They are also partnering with Wonderful Water Run for a training program. Otherwise, you can reach out to Charlie or Nate, talk to them about all of your athletic training needs. Nike Central Wisconsin Running Camp is here. That is 7th through 12th middle and high schoolers. You can find more info by searching Nike Central Wisconsin Running on the US Sports Camp website. Ranger Ruck is here, ROTC fundraiser in September, where you run 6 miles through Schmeekly with a 35-pound pack on your back. Point Bach Run is represented, sponsored in part by the Stevens Point Brewery. The Point Bach Run, Inc., a 501c3 nonprofit organization, hosts 2,000 runners annually for the first Saturday in March. They offer grants for events that align with their mission of promoting running and healthy lifestyles in central Wisconsin. Iron Bowl is also here, another 501c3 nonprofit charitable organization that promotes outdoor adventure sports in central Wisconsin. They have trail runs, gravel races, adventure races, and more. And UWSP School of Health Science and Wellness. Lots of educational opportunities, not just degrees related to health and wellness. So give it up for everybody who took the time out to be here. I'm just going to do a very short intro for 3 of our speakers today. They are all going to tell you all about themselves, the history, and things that you didn't know. So we're all very excited. We are going to welcome Don Banky up first to speak. After him will be Nate Brown, and then third will be Tom Wetter. After all 3 of them have given a talk, we'll do a short panel at the end so you guys can write your questions down, keep them in mind, bring them up as soon as we're finished with the speaking portion. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Don.
Thanks, everyone. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Tom on his outstanding accomplishment of 25 Boston Marathons. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here tonight. Tom told me I had about 20 minutes. I'm going to use every second of the 20 minutes and maybe a little bit more. He didn't give me a specific topic because I think he knew that as a runner, a coach, an author, and a history teacher, I would have no trouble at all finding something to talk about here this evening. I got a clicker. Wait. There we go. I've always felt that the general public doesn't have a strong enough appreciation for how important distance running has been to the evolution of the human race. We don't know exactly when human beings learned to run. It may have been as far back as 2 million years ago. But it's well documented that the early human-like creatures who could not run did not survive. It was us, the Homo sapiens, with our longer legs, our shorter arms, and our rather pronounced buttocks muscles that learned to walk upright, and eventually we learned to run, often for very long distances. This skill allowed early man to catch food, avoid becoming food, escape all sorts of dangers, travel great distances, explore their environment, and of course, impress the cave-dwelling ladies with their stamina and endurance, which was a pretty good thing back in the day and still is today. We tend to make a big deal out of those people that call themselves sprinters, but the reality is that human beings are quite a bit slower than most of the creatures in the animal kingdom. What we truly excel at is our ability to run long distances because we have the ability to breathe rapidly, process oxygen, and dissipate heat through sweating, sometimes profusely. Of course, we have no way of knowing at what point running became a competitive sport but it was probably sometime shortly after early man learned how to throw rocks and beat each other with blunt objects. Combined, those three things were basically some type of a caveman triathlon. Of course, we know that the first recorded races took place in ancient Greece as a part of a series of contests known as the Olympic Games in honor of the god Zeus. The games began in 776 BC as a one-day event, a holiday where contestants sprinted the length of a stadium, which was exactly 192 meters. That was followed by a feast, and then everyone went home. Eventually, though, it was decided that distance races should be added for those of us that are a little bit more cerebral and wanted a sport that might include some strategy and an endurance component, and where people might actually break a sweat while doing it. Other events like wrestling, jumping, and throwing were later added, and in time they even added pants to the Olympics, which I think we can all agree was a very necessary addition to the Olympics. The event we call the marathon was not part of the ancient Olympic Games. It was first contested in 1896 as part of the first modern Olympic Games held in Athens, Greece. It was the brainchild of a guy named Pierre de Coubertin, a rich French guy, and it was his idea to include an excessively long race as the very last event. So on the final day of competition, runners would race a distance of about 25 miles from the plains of Marathon to the center of Athens to commemorate the very famous Battle of Marathon, which happened in 490 BC, and a very young runner by the name of Phidippides. Fittingly, running played a huge part in this incredibly important battle. The Persian army outnumbered the Greeks by about 3-1. They had the most advanced and fearsome weapon of the day, the bow and arrow, and they knew how to use it. They were the #1 seed, clearly, and they were up against the number 16 seeded Greeks, who expected to lose. So the Greeks marched forward to their doom at a very slow pace at first, and then all of a sudden they broke into a flat-out sprint, which totally freaked out the Persians, who were overrun after launching only a few flights of arrows. They soiled themselves and were soundly defeated. The victory marked the decline of the Persian Empire and the rise of Greek greatness, which had a profound and lasting effect on world history, and specifically on the form of government here in the United States and the culture of us here in America. After the battle, a young man named Phidippides was sent to spread the good news. And according to legend, he sprinted the 25 miles to Athens before falling to his knees and yelling, "Rejoice, we conquer." And at that point, it is said that he died of exhaustion, a burst heart, or my theory is that it was a terminal case of chafing. We don't know what his time was. He wasn't given a medal, but rumor has it that he was given the very first running t-shirt, which said something like, "I ran 25 miles and all I got was this lousy t-shirt." And so when Coubertin decided to add the race to the 1896 Olympic schedule, there was great concern that many of the runners would suffer the same fate as young Phidippides. But that didn't happen. The race started on the plains of Marathon, and it ended here in the Olympic Stadium that was used by the ancient Greeks at one point in time. The race consisted of just 17 runners, and it was won by a Greek shepherd by the name of Spyridon Lewis, who is shown here in his Bo Peep outfit. He quickly, after spending some time in a local bar mid-race, he still ran 2:58.58 to earn the grand prize, a laurel wreath, and a lifetime of free shaves from a local barber shop. And best of all, nobody died. The event was a huge success. It captured the imagination of people from all over the world, and a sort of marathon craze swept the globe as the world became marathon crazy. And the word marathon became synonymous with anything that had to do with great endurance or took a long time to complete. Suddenly, long foot races like this one sprung up all across the globe. And what many people thought was a passing fad would eventually burn itself out, but it didn't. In 1897, excited by the success of the Olympic marathon, the Boston Athletic Club decided that they would hold a 24.5-mile race through the streets of Boston. The first race was held on Patriots' Day. It was won by a guy named J.J. McDermott. So as far as we know, he didn't stop at a tavern, but he ran 2:55:10. And despite the fact that there were only 15 runners in the race, it was considered to be a huge success and would become the world's oldest annual marathon, and it would draw people from all over the world, as well as exotic places like Stevens Point, Wisconsin. Now, I'm not an expert on the Boston Marathon, but I've come to think of it as something more than just a foot race. I think it's a social experiment where the best runners in the world get to run. People like the very famous Bill Rogers and the very evil Alberto Salazar and our very own Tom Wetter, who is shown here wearing a uniform made for him by his 6-year-old son, Eli. These people work together, encourage one another, and as they chase down their dreams and perhaps run a PR on a challenging Boston course. The people of Boston aren't usually nice on this one day out of the year. They turn out in droves to celebrate the holiday and cheer the runners on along the route. Girls from a local college even give kisses to the runners as they pass, which might have been good to know when I was a young man in college. It might also explain why some people go back there 25 consecutive years. The Boston Marathon is really a big deal. It's one of the greatest athletic events in the world, and part of its appeal is that it's open to the general public as long as you're able to meet the challenging but reasonable qualifying standards. So in theory, just about anyone could run the Boston Marathon. If they wanted it badly enough, Will Ferrell, P. Diddy, or even Oprah could have run Boston. Of course, they didn't. Even heavy-legged people like me could have run Boston, and I wish I had. It's one of my few regrets in my running career. I always thought that a person built like a linebacker should not be running a marathon, so I only ran 3 of them, none particularly fast, but I wish I'd gone to Boston, because Boston is the kind of thing I think every serious runner ought to do at least once in their lifetime, or perhaps 25 times. So every year on Patriots' Day, Boston becomes the center of the running universe. There are good and bad things that happen there, and everything that happens gets magnified. It gains greater attention. Things like the incident in 1967 when race officials tried to prevent Catherine Switzer from running the race simply because she had the gall to have been born a female. I remember this iconic photo from the newspaper when I was young, and I wish I could say I was outraged by it. But I was 14 years old at the time, and the only thing that outraged me was the fact that Hostess Twinkies had gone from 13 cents to 15 cents. In time, like most people, I came to realize the importance of this event. Like Rosa Parks sitting on the front seat of a bus, this changed things for a lot of us. It opened the doors for girls and women to participate in sports of all kinds, which as a father of a daughter who was a runner, and as a coach, and frankly, as a member of the human race, I'm just thankful this happened. I'm thankful to the Boston Marathon. I'm thankful it's not just a race, but a catalyst for change, in a place where so many good people, like Tom Wetter, and the rest of you guys who have run at Boston, Kevin and everybody else that's run at Boston, it's a truly wonderful event, and I'm so glad that people like Tom and the rest of you have had the experience to be there and do this. Now, Tom asked me to say give some of my thoughts about running here in Stevens Point since I started my running career in 1968 at Marshall High School. The truth is that I never wanted to be a runner, and I only went to practice because my brother was on the team and he was having some success, and I got pressured into it. I was absolutely certain I was going to hate it, but for reasons I can't fully explain, I learned to love being a runner, and it only took about an hour.
Why aren't you in the picture?
That's me, lower left. Like a slightly younger version. Oh yeah, thanks, Tom. You made me lose my place. Back in the day, we ran on cinder tracks. Our running shorts were made of a combination of cotton and some sort of industrial abrasive. And the footwear was horrible. Adidas was the only shoe company, and you had two choices. You could get the blue ones, which were called Gazelles, or you could get the green ones, which were called Italias. And since the shoes came by boat from West Germany, you couldn't buy them in the winter after the Great Lakes froze over. Now, I know that sounds really archaic and ancient, because it was, but for the most part, I don't think running has changed much since the very first day I started. Sure, modern technology is amazing, and I definitely wish I had the chance to run in the super shoes that you current runners get to run in. But at its core, running is still about chugging down the road, often surrounded by really good friends and hopefully under the guidance of a knowledgeable and inspiring coach. That's the way it was at Marshall High School for me in 1968, 69, and 70. And I'll be forever grateful to the taxpayers in Milwaukee and Coach Leo Potashnik. You might have guessed that was my coach. For providing me with a life-changing experience and pointing me in the direction of a college career here at the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point. My college experience began in the basement of Burroughs Hall, where I was assigned a cot, surrounded by 30 other cot-dwelling young men who were in college to avoid the Vietnam War and drink at the local bars since the drinking age was 18. I was 17 at the time, so those things didn't apply to me. I was there to become a college runner and perhaps pass enough classes to earn some sort of degree. And so, as my many roommates headed out to get falling down drunk at the local bars, I put on my running shoes and headed down a street called Reserve. I found myself running on a road without streetlights and sidewalks for the very first time in my life. Running in a town so small it only had 4 stoplights and not a single McDonald's. It was a completely new experience for me to run in a rural area where the next intersection might be miles down the road. And the pungent smell of cows, pigs, and chickens hung in the air. I found the entire experience to be fun and exhilarating at first, but as I turned onto Jordan Lane and got near to a road called St. Casimir's, I became fearful because I'd just seen the movie Deliverance, and I swear I heard banjo music from back in the woods. Some of you might have to Google it, or maybe not. So I turned around and went home. Fast, really, really fast. My experience at EWSP did not start out the way I had expected. I thought I'd have a knowledgeable coach, well-motivated teammates, and at the very least, a bed to sleep in. But none of those things happened. I found myself to be sad, lonely, failing most of my classes. I was placed on academic probation. I thought about quitting. I probably should have quit. The only reason I didn't is because I love to run, and I was a distance runner, and everything I'd been taught through distance running was, you never give up. You never, never quit. And I really liked the city of Stevens Point, but unfortunately it wasn't much of a running community back in 1971. A place where you seldom saw anyone running except for some old guy named Judge Jenkins, who for some reason we would see running down Old Wausau Road every once in a while, and we thought he was ancient. He was probably 50 at the time. I received very little in the way of coaching, and the upperclassmen on my team were poorly motivated to the point where some of them came to practice drunk. Unfortunately, or fortunately, some of my freshman teammates were as passionate about running as I was, and together we set out to change the culture and build a positive program. So we ran, and we ran. We ran a lot. We explored, we created some of the same loops that runners use today. We found a trail behind the airport, which we named the Airport Loop. We found the Woodview Mile, the Junkyard Loop, Double Dubé, and the Nut House Loop, which we named because the sign said sanatorium, and we thought it said sanitarium. Probably why I was on academic probation. Armed with this little tiny bit of knowledge about training and a vast amount of dedication, we got better. We built a competitive team, and we infected the incoming runners with the thought that we knew what we were doing, and that Stevens Point was a community of runners and a good place to be. We didn't know it at the time, but we were at the forefront of what would become known as the running boom. Frank Shorter's victory in the 72 Marathon Olympics gets credit for starting this, but I've always felt that Billy Mills, Jim Ryan, and a guy named Prefontaine should be included in that list of people that started the running boom. They had a big effect on me, I know that for sure. Almost overnight, we noticed an increase in the number of people we saw out running in town, and a decrease in the amount of profanity directed our way while we did our workouts. Suddenly, there were road races every weekend all over the state, where for $5 or $6, you could get a t-shirt and probably a medal. Running had become mainstream, and people who'd never run a step in their lives were now lining up and running 5Ks and 10Ks. We noticed young kids running. We noticed old people, some of them in their 30s and 40s and 50s. And girls started running, which, as a bunch of college guys, we found that particularly interesting. We didn't know what to do about it, but we found it interesting. I don't mean to imply that Stevens Point became a running community overnight, but things changed here during the 70s. And by the time I was a senior, our team managed to qualify for the national cross-country meet for the first time in school history. And we outscored lacrosse in the distance races at the conference track meet and won the State University conference meet. Why did this happen? Well, first of all, Stevens Point is a really great place to be a runner. From the tree-lined roads to the quiet city streets, the Schmeeckley Reserve, the Green Circle, and our city parks, our community is full of really good and convenient places to run. But I think the bigger reason for this is that people, like many of you in this room, with a passion for running, simply invited other people to tag along, to be included, to be a part of something, to be a part of something good, something healthy, something successful. And that's what happened at UWSP in the 70s, and that's what happened when I showed up at SPASH in 1977 and got the job there. Stevens Point High School was one of the largest schools in the state, but it hadn't produced many good runners beyond a guy named Reisner and a guy named Don Ciplina, who were big-time stars back in the 60s. But it had been sort of a dry spell for SPASH, and SPASH was known for its baseball players, wrestlers, sprinters, and basketball teams, but it wasn't thought of as a distance running community. And so on the very first day of practice, I took the guys on a run. We went up Reserve Street, across on Jordan, over the overpass, past the junkyard onto St. Casimir, and back on Old Wausau. The young men on our team had never run this route. They had never run that far. And why was that? Because no one had ever asked them to. They'd never had a leader to show them how much fun running could be, especially if you have a really good group of guys to do it with, and a place where you could be accepted no matter how odd or dysfunctional you might be. It didn't take long for the guys at SPASH to embrace the idea of working hard, running big mileage, setting goals, and building a team that could run with the best in the state. But most of all, they embraced the idea that running was fun, and being a SPASH distance runner was something special. It was amazing how quickly things changed. We got to our very first state meet that year and finished 4th. We won 5 state titles and had 2 runner-up state meet runner-ups at state meet appearances over the next 8 years, and a tradition was established, a tradition that carries on to this day. At a time when at the same time, our girls team, coached by Mike Olson, was building its own tradition of excellence. Rick Witt was fielding some great teams and individuals here at UWSP. Don Fritsch and Rob Sparhawk built some outstanding Pacelli teams. Mike Tributowski started a wonderful tradition at Rosholt, and a team that still is highly successful to this day. The Halls and the Hansons started something called Spark, the Stevens Point Area Running Club, that became highly successful. And Tom Jensen started something called Club Men, for older runners who didn't mind mixing running with a bit of beer. I don't have time to list all the great teams and individuals our community has produced over the years, but if I did, the list would be long and really, really impressive. It would include state champs, state record holders, national champs, national record holders, All-Americans, and people who've run in world championships and the Olympics. I know that people wonder why we've had so many outstanding runners from the Stevens Point area. Some say it's the water, some say it's the Plover potatoes, Point beer, ice cream, or Skittles and ham. They guess all kinds of things, but none of those things are what make us special. I think the answer lies in the community of people who love to run, people who've created teams and groups that are welcoming and supportive, groups that don't care if you're fast or slow, don't turn anyone away, and have a way of making you feel special and feeling as if you really belong. And all you have to do is show up and run just a little bit. And so for those of you non-runners in the room, and I don't know if there's many, but if there are, and if you want to know about running and about building a team and what this is all about, I suggest my book. And I didn't necessarily come here to sell books, but I'll be happy to sell you one. I suggest you read this story about this young man, Scott the Animal Longley, a man with multiple disabilities who joined our team in 1985 and was accepted into our quirky group of runners, and against all odds became a varsity runner and helped us win a state title, something we absolutely could not have done without Scott. Back when we used to have a newspaper. Some people remember this clearly, this article about Scott and the fact that he was going to get to run the state meet with his team. I know it's a classic feel-good story with a happy ending, but I think it's more than that. I think it's an example of everything that makes our sport so great and why Stevens Point is such a special place for those of us lucky enough to live here and lucky enough to be runners here. So, thank you very much. I'll stick around later if anybody is interested, or we have some questions later. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Take that.
It's just for the video.
Okay. Thank you, Don. I don't know if you were trying to make me tear up, but it made me tear up and got really inspired. So let's see. All right, so next we're kind of shifting gears a little bit from story to a little bit of science. And we're going to be talking about getting to the starting line. And as you'll notice, this isn't called getting to the finish line, because that's kind of the easy part. When you get to the starting line, you know you're ready for the race. It's getting to that point where you can get to the starting line through building sustainable habits for running. Just briefly about me, I'm a physical therapist, and I teach here at the university in the physical therapy program, in the doctoral program. And my training brought me to a number of places, to Madison and Delaware, where I earned my doctorate in physical therapy. And then I started working with runners in the community in Stevens Point. And this community, when I came here, is one that was filled with people who were passionate about the running and the running community. And it's just been a joy to be a part of it. And my love for running has only grown by living in this place. So I also have a couple other side gigs. So I work with the Pioneers Running Lab, and we're a group of PTs who do run coaching, and we do running analysis and things like that. I work with a group of PTs across the country called Doctors of Running, and we do running shoe reviews where I run in an obscene amount of shoes, about 70 to 100 per year, to test out and give our thoughts from a physical therapy perspective of who might this shoe be best for. I have a little extra training from the Movement Performance Institute, where I learned about lower extremity biomechanics and how that influences your running. But that's way too much about me. The reason why we're here is we're all asking the same question: how can I be like Tom Wetter? As someone who is able to run 25 Boston marathons, and I don't mean being like Tom in just being able to run 25 Boston marathons. I don't mean being like Tom in his kindness and his compassion. I don't mean it like I asked Joe Kotlowski, a good friend of him today, how would you describe Tom? And one thing he says, he can just bluntly tell you the truth. When you finished in a 3:03 marathon, and Tom said, you know, if you would have ran faster, you could have went under 3 hours, you know? So I'm not talking about any of those things. I'm also not talking about running 25 Boston marathons. What he has found is a way to do something that he loves at a level that he has wanted to achieve that practice and that skill for a sustainably long time. He's been doing it forever. So how can we be like Tom? And spoiler alert, we aren't going to be able to take his cookbook. There's no recipe for replicating success just by the way that somebody else did it. How Tom has been able to do what he has done, there are probably tons of gems of wisdom, but you won't be able to replicate it exactly in your life. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. 9,120,000. That number represents a conservative estimate of the number of runners that get hurt every single year. There are about 60 million runners in the United States and upwards of 85 million, talking about the running boom. There are a lot of people participating in running, and systematic reviews where they look at all of the data of who's getting injured estimate somewhere between 18% and 78% of runners get injured in a year. So if we take the most conservative level, this is the number of people who get injured in a year, which is why it's so hard to get to the starting line. But, and I did want to say, with those 9,180,000, 120,000 injuries, there's a couple that pop up more commonly than others. So this represents the 5 most common regions of the body that people experience running-related injuries. Number 1 overall is at the knee, and so people will have things like patellofemoral pain, which is typically called a runner's knee, if you've ever used that term for yourself before. There are things like patellar tendinopathy, IT band syndrome. There are a lot of things that can happen there. Your number 2 is going to be down at the foot, whether if it's bone stress injuries of the long bones in your foot, or if it's things like plantar fascia pain or plantar fasciitis. Your 3rd most common region is going to be in the shin, the classic shin splints, which is an umbrella for a lot of things that could move from nerve-related injuries to bone stress-related injuries to tendon-related injuries. The 4th is up at the hip, where you might have things like greater trochanteric pain syndrome, fancy word for pain on the outside of your hip, or other sort of impingement syndromes that can happen more on the front of the hip. And finally, the 5th most common is just at the Achilles tendon or the calf as well. But why do we get injured? Because that's the nut that we can't seem to crack. It's very difficult. And there's a lot of people, if you're a runner in this room, there's probably been a time in your life where you've been sidelined by an injury. I am one of them right now. I have my own things going on. So I thought I'd give you this really easy schematic to understand running-related injuries. So got it? All right. I'll try to put this in a couple other words. This was a framework that was created by some researchers to try to further research and understand how running-related injuries happen. In this paper, this is their quote, which I think is helpful. It says, injury occurs as a result of the runner possessing multiple risk factors and then participating in running under certain circumstances to a degree to where the structure's load capacity was exceeded. This still might be confusing, so let me break it down another way. Running-related injuries happen ultimately when the demands that you put on your body exceed the structural capacity of the structure of interest, whether if it's your Achilles tendon, your plantar fascia, whatever it is. So if your running demands exceed your physical status, that's when you're going to run into a running-related injury. So there are a lot of things that can come into understanding what your running demands are, and they're going to be so individual, and we'll go into that in a little bit. But it might have to do with your running volume, meaning how many times a week are you running? How long are you going on those runs for? What sort of terrain are you on? Are you doing a lot of hill running? If you're on hills, as you're running up, the demand shifts to the back of your body where your hamstrings, your glutes, your calves are taking a little bit more of the work. If you're running down hills, your quadriceps, your knees take a little bit more demand. The type of shoes you put on your feet. You mentioned super shoes. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit. That's going to shift exactly where your loads are. And then your individual biomechanics. People run in tons of different ways, and they're all great, and they're all wonderful, and they all shift loads to different places, so we'll talk about that. Your physical status can change on a dime, but it includes so many things. It has to do with, have you been running for 25, 30, 40, 50, 60 years? Your body has adapted to running when you've ran for years on end. If you're a new runner, it's a brand new stimulus, and your body has to adapt over time. Your previous injuries are going to influence your physical status. If you went through a major injury like an Achilles tendon rupture, or if you have a more minor injury like nagging knee pain, your body has to adapt to that injury and has to be able to recover. There are other things at the bottom here like strength and mobility. How much motion do your joints have? Do they have enough motion to get through the demands that running puts on the body? And then you have the things that affect our daily life. Are you getting enough fuel? Are you drinking enough water? Are you getting enough sleep? How is the overall stress level in your life? Those things all influence your physical status, which can change on a dime. So as I've referenced, everyone's demands, everyone's physical status are different. This is just one example that I wanted to share with you. When we look at these two runners, you can notice that there are some significant differences in the way that they're landing. I'm not going to say that one of these is good and one of these is bad. I'm just going to say that they're different. When you look at the runner on the left, you can notice a couple things. One of them is that they are landing with their shin, this blue line, is tilted forward. We call that tibial inclination. When we look over here on the right, at the same point in time when the foot's just contacting the ground, that shin is in a much more vertical position. Just in this example, when you land with your shin a little bit forward like that, it puts more demand through all of the structures in the knee. But when you land with your foot a little bit more underneath you, the overall impact loading through the knee is less. The reason why I say that one is not better than the other is if the runner on the left has the tissue capacity to handle the foot landing a little bit further out in front of them, they're not going to run into any problems. But it's helpful to know if this person does start developing some knee issues, the way that they land can influence how we understand their running-related injury. So just remember, your demands are going to be different. So again, what works for one person won't work for another because you are going to be unique in the way that you move. At the same time, everyone's physical status is different. Mine is different than every single one of yours here in the room. And our own status is going to change all of the time. I put this picture up of these two little guys, Henry and Ray, because at that phase of my life, my physical status was a little bit different. I was sleeping a lot less. We sleep great now, and it's awesome. There was a lot more stress generally in my life because I didn't know how to be a dad, and I still don't know how to be a dad all the time, still trying to figure it out. Trying to figure out what it's like to have a different job, and we moved towns around this time. We just bought a new house. All of those stresses influenced my body's ability to handle the additional stress of running. So we're going to go into that a little bit more. So the next thing I want to share are the big three. I would say these are some of the top 3 mistakes that we see runners make, both from the research, but also anecdotally from my time working with runners. And I hope that these feel obvious, because they are. The first is doing too much too soon. We try to set awesome, exciting goals for ourselves, and then we try to go out and achieve them on day 1 instead of recognizing that running is a lifelong commitment and can take years and years to get to the place that you want to be. The second thing that we do is we don't fully recover from a previous injury. So if we have had some sort of knee pain or bone stress injury or Achilles tendinopathy or whatever it is, a lot of times, I know I'm guilty of this myself, once I'm feeling good enough to run, I ditch my rehab program and I jump back into my training full bore. I'm a huge proponent of continuing to run as we deal with injuries, but it's really important to make sure you recover fully. Because in these 2 scenarios, the number 1 group of people who get injured are new runners within their first 2 years of picking up the sport. The second group of people who are injured are those who have had a previous injury in the 6 months prior to the current injury that they're having. So you have to make sure that you start where you need to be and where you're actually at, and then also fully recover from anything that comes in your path along the way. The final one is emphasizing the 1%. There are a lot of really exciting things out there. Theraguns, percussion massagers, Normatec boots, which are these, if you haven't seen them, they're these big inflatable things that give compression to your legs, ice baths, contrast baths, foam rolling. There's all of these things that get pushed at us as runners. Once you enter the running sphere and you might Google one thing about running, you're going to get fed the 1%. all of these things that try to convince you if you do this one thing, you're never going to get injured again. And we tend to emphasize the 1%. So speaking of the 1%, I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about running shoes, because I talk way too much about them with Doctors of Running. So I did want to answer a few questions that Tom had recommended I kind of just give my 2 cents on. There are a lot of different shoes out there. There's everything from what we would call minimalist footwear, which gained popularity a long time ago, but really had a surge of popularity in the early 2000s and in 2010s. These would be shoes that feel like you're barefoot. They have no cushioning underneath them. And then that goes all the way up into shoes that have over 50 millimeters of foam underneath your foot and give you a ton of cushioning. So there's this huge range of the types of shoes. There's all of these different types of companies. Some you may have heard of: Nike, Adidas, Saucony. Some that you may not have: Topo Athletic, Newton Running. There's so many options out there. And it can be hard to know, oh, like, I do want to start running. What am I supposed to run in? How do I choose the shoe that I want to be in? So I just wanted to give a couple quick tips on how to pick running shoes. And in this, I want to dispel basically one main myth. The main myth that I want to dispel is that if you have a certain foot type or run a certain way, you should run in a certain type of shoe. Very, very common, and it still happens in practice today, where you'll either go to a store or you'll see a physical therapist and they'll say, hey, you have flat feet, you have low arches, you need a shoe with some support, you need a shoe with a post, you need some structure. Or, oh, you have a very high arch and therefore we have to give you a certain kind of shoe. So far, the overwhelming evidence that we have from the research is that just doesn't work. If you try to pair your foot type with a type of shoe just based off of your static foot posture, standing there in the store, or taking a little bit of a walk down the aisle, it doesn't do enough to embrace the complexity that running is, because it's a full body effort. And so what has been found in the literature is that the best way to choose a shoe for yourself is as simple as what we call the comfort filter. And so it's going into a store, trying on a large number of shoes. If you're in a running store, they probably have a treadmill to try out, and just start to ask your questions. How does this feel underneath my foot, the cushioning underneath? Does it feel like there's compression in different parts of the shoe, whether in the toe box, meaning up by your toes, or in the back of the heel? And you're really just trusting your body's instinct when it comes to the shoe that you should pick. When people have done that, it has decreased their rate of injury in comparison to try to pairing shoes to a specific foot type. Once you've ran for a while, you'll also start to know what kind of shoes you like and what kind of shoes you don't like. Some you're going to notice, that was a really stiff shoe from front to back. Do not like it. Or, oh, I liked how soft and cushioned that was. Oh, I wish I could feel the ground more. You're going to start to learn things about yourself as you go. And then the one other thing that has been shown is if you have recurring injuries of a certain type, you can get shoes that help decrease the stress on the body that those types of injuries are related to. So the one I'm referring to in specifics are called pronation-related injuries. Pronation is when you have your foot rolling in and your foot kind of flattens out. I will say up front, pronation is not bad. It is a normal part of shock absorption, and it helps you run. But people who have recurrent injuries like plantar fascia pain or tibialis posterior tendinopathy, if you've had these things, you know those terms, and if you haven't, great, don't worry about it. Some of those people benefit from having some structure in their shoes, but ultimately, it's so individual. And I can't stand up here and say, this is the best shoe on the market. It just doesn't exist. There's going to be the best shoe for you that you will learn in time. The last thing I wanted to talk about, I actually left the shoes over here. Let me grab them, are the super shoes. So super shoes started back in the mid to late 2000s or 2010s when Nike came out with the Vaporfly. They called it the Vaporfly 4% because they did a study where they looked at what's somebody's running economy wearing a normal racing flat, which at the time had as little foam as possible to get you through the marathon but be as light as possible, as compared to this super high stacked shoe with a carbon plate on the inside. And so they found that those people who were wearing those shoes with the high stack, still lightweight, were able to run with a better running economy and finish with less fatigue in their muscles. So the question kind of is like, what are these shoes? The first thing is they kind of have three components. One is a fancy foam. It's a PIBA, it's called PIBA Vase foam, and it's a very, very light foam. I'm going to leave the shoes up here if you want to just feel how light these are based on how much shoe there still is in the area. So the first thing is this fancy foam. The second thing is these fancy foams are so light and so squishy that they're super unstable. So they put this carbon plate into the shoe to stabilize the foam. The plate has become the kind of the golden jewel of marketing, and they're like, oh, it's got this carbon plate, it's going to fling you forward. But they've actually done a number of studies that show that the carbon plate doesn't contribute a whole lot to the running economy. They just stabilize the platform. But they have a carbon plate, so I cannot bend this shoe very much at all, because it transfers all of the load that would go through your joints as you go through the running gait into the rocker sole. So thing one is the foam, thing two is the plate, and thing three is this curve in the shoe. Those three components make a super shoe. People respond really well to super shoes, meaning they can run more economically. People don't respond at all to super shoes, or can actually have negative impacts, and everybody's different. So again, can I tell you to go get a super shoe? Absolutely not. Are they fun to run in? Absolutely. Do they cost almost $300? Yes. So not a very approachable type of shoe, but they are fun. And they've also done a study that looked at people who are running faster, down at like the 6 minute and under minute per mile for their testing, and people who are running more of a 9 and 10 minute per mile speed. They found that the people who were running those faster speeds had higher benefits, somewhere between 3 and 4% improvement, whereas those who were running at the 9 or 10 minute pace still had some improvement, but more around 1%. So my take is find a shoe that you like. You do not need a super shoe if you want to run a marathon. You can run in whatever shoe works for you and is comfortable. There's a lot of good shoes on the market. So yeah, we just talked about the 1% for way too long. So let's get back and talk about the other big three, which are tips for developing sustainable running habits. The first one is train where you're at, not where you want to be. I want to qualify for Boston Marathon. And in 2017, I wanted to qualify for the Boston Marathon. Still haven't done it. And in 2017, what I decided to do was I knew the minute per mile pace that I needed to do for a marathon. So I started doing all of my runs at that pace. And I had never ran a marathon before. Guess what? I got hurt a lot during that training cycle and ran that marathon. I completed it, but it hurt. Train where you're at, not where you want to be. If you train where you are and you incrementally increase your intensity, you're going to get to where you want to be, but it might take longer than you want it to, but it's going to get you there. The second thing is your rehab is complete when you're stronger than you were when you got injured. So don't give up on your rehab just because your pain has subsided enough to get back out on the trail. Keep working on your rehab exercises and get yourself as strong and mobile as possible. And emphasize the 99%. By this I mean really focus on your overall life stress. Really focus on your sleep, really focus on your nutrition and your hydration. Those things are not sexy, but they will get you to the starting line, and Normatec boots and foam rolling will not. Doesn't mean those things are bad, but you gotta emphasize the 99%. So how can you be like Tom? You don't have to get a PhD in whatever Tom got his PhD in, but you should get a PhD in yourself, because everything that you can do to prevent injuries for your running journey lie in your understanding of what your physical status is and the running demands that you put on it. So thank you all.
Okay. All right. I had a former student named Aaron Hunnell who's working now for the Wisconsin National Guard as their health and wellness director. And he came to one of my classes. He's a really motivational speaker. And he was talking about his recent bike ride across the US. where he was raising awareness for veterans. He had veterans supporting him, and he was talking about the team. And this was the kind of saying or proverb that he put at the beginning of his talk. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And hopefully by the end of my part of the talk, I'll have made you believe this, because I really think it's true. The second thing is to get you to stay for the next 20 or 25 minutes, because I'm going to start a little story. And it's a story about a dad and his young son. And they're sitting at breakfast one morning. And the son says, you know, Dad, in school we've been learning about these terms, commitment and contribution. And I'm not quite sure the difference between them. Well, you have to wait. Okay, here's me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. And my running story began back in elementary school, St. Adelbert's. This is a picture of me. I don't know if you can guess who's that. I'm right next to Brian O'Black, and here's Brian Wilson, who was the stud of our school, of course winning. And, you know, I wasn't really fast. I mean, I was okay, but I did have fine form, okay? I had that going for me. And oops, I did win some ribbons. Now, maybe like today, they gave ribbons to anyone, so I'm not quite sure. But here I am with my sister. And obviously, you know, I was really happy about getting those ribbons. My sister and I trained for this, these field days. Field days was once a year, end of the school year. All the kids from 3rd grade to 8th grade would go to the track, Baldwin Wallace track, get to run on this nice all-weather track. So we trained for it. The week before field days, we'd be out in front of our house. We'd be running the 40 yards down from our house to the end of the block. We'd have a stopwatch, do it a few times, we'd be set. That was grade school. Then something really amazing happened. You know, if that was just it, I'd have been done. In 8th grade, they said, for the first time, you guys are going to have a cross-country team at your school. None of us knew what cross-country was, but I knew that I couldn't play football because my parents wouldn't let me, and I was really bad at basketball, so cross-country might be something to do. Well, we found out it was about running, which was a good thing because, you know, I had that form, and I was going to do really well. And what we did is we went to Kmart, we bought knockoff Adidas shoes, which were like $5, and one of the guys' dads, Mr. Gaughan, who was an Irish guy, was our coach. He didn't know anything about running, but neither did we. And so we ran around the neighborhood for a little bit, and we had one meet. We had one meet that year. It was 3/4 of a mile. That was the distance. And I remember that a half hour before the race, the 7 of us who were on the team got together. We went to the drugstore, bought a Bit O' Honey candy bar. And we knew that honey was a good fuel. So 30 minutes before the race, we broke that up into 7 pieces. Each had a bite, ran the race. And we were fueled by that honey sugar. I didn't do very well. I don't think I was last, but I probably was pretty close. Luckily, I liked it. Don't know why, kind of like Don. A friend of my mom's, Kathy Weston, took me under her wing. She had 2 daughters who were runners. Turns out they were sprinters. That wasn't something I was ever going to be very good at. But she took me under her wing, took me to the track a few times, had me run around, took me to some AAU meets in Ohio, you know, ran the mile, ended up running like some longer races, and found that, you know, I really liked this thing. Okay. You run, you're training. Oh, one more thing. I started running with a 7th grader. I'm in 8th grade. 7th grader Jimmy Smanik. And we're training. We're still in grade school. We're training through the summer. We need to find out if this training is working. So we sign up for a race. July 4th race through the parks. 10K race. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little story now. This is sort of related to Boston Marathon. 2 guys here are named Johnny Kelly. Same name. They're not related, okay? This is Johnny the Elder. This is Johnny the Younger. And the story starts out with Johnny the Younger being 17 years old. He's in high school. And he and his friend, George Terry, sign up to do a handicap race in Littleton, Massachusetts. This is 1947. And Johnny the Younger's dad is going to go along, and he said, hey, you know, Johnny the Elder is supposed to be at this race. It was in celebration of his 40th birthday. So the 2 young high schoolers go off to this race. It's a handicap race, which means depending on how fast you are, you get a head start. So young Johnny and his friend get a 7.5-minute head start. Okay? It's a 90-degree day, really hot, humid, but the 2 boys take off and they eventually take the lead. Okay, and they're going along fine. Johnny the Younger at about 5 miles starts to feel bad, makes it to 7 miles, sits down on the curb. He just can't go anymore. He's cramped, exhausted, said forget it. His friend goes on, wins the race. Johnny the Elder started last because he was the fastest. He won the time prize. So you have one guy winning the whole race. Johnny the Elder won the time. Johnny the Younger got nothing. He was the man out. So he's sitting on the curb, kind of disconsolate, kind of sobbing, saying, I hate running, never doing this again. His dad goes over after the awards, grabs Johnny the Elder, says, come on over and talk to my son. Johnny the Elder walks over to him, kind of looks down at him, says, son, you're going to be fine. You got runner's legs. And Johnny the Younger says that one thing that he said kept him in that sport for the rest of his life. Pretty cool story. All right. Oh, so why is that related to me and Jimmy Smanik running that race? Same thing happened to me. Jimmy Smanik, he's 13 years old. I think he won his age group. I'm in the 14 through 18. I got smoked, okay? I was way back. And at the end, I remember sitting on the grass, just, you know, feeling bad about myself. And these old guys, they're probably 25, 30 years old, come over and say, hey, you know, you didn't do too bad. How long you been running? Well, I just, you know, a couple months this summer. Hey, you keep it up. You keep it up and you're going to be really good. You'll see. So I guess that's what I did. I kept running, hit high school at, I don't know if you can see there, I was 5'2", 95 pounds. I think my son Eli was that when he was, I don't know, 10, yeah. So there I am. I actually had some success. The only reason I had success as a freshman in high school, I was the only kid who'd been running. Everyone else, first-time runners. I remember, beginning of practice, the coach would send us out for a 2-mile warm-up. We'd head out the driveway of the school, turn right to go down the block. I'd go out, I'd be in front. The rest of the guys, probably 7 or 8 more, they found an evergreen tree, big leaves, they hid under it until I came back, and then they fell in behind me and we went to the track. Our track, where we trained a lot, cinder, dirt track, had a kind of depression on the northeast corner that used to fill with about 6 inches of water. So either you went wide around or you got a paddle and you tried to get through that. This is, I think, my sophomore year when we had a ton of people. I'm there in the middle there. But by our senior year, I think I was on a team of 7 or 8 guys. Real easy to make varsity. And you think about the team that Don and Kevin have at Spash now, you know, I would have been way, way back in the pack. What I think was hilarious, and I just found this looking through my high school yearbooks, was the yearbook editor thought because we had a higher score, we actually did really well in all our meets. Well, where does marathoning come in? Turns out I also did track in high school, but my sophomore year, the football coach was coaching the distance runners. And me and my friend Greg Hisney really didn't like the football coach. Looking back, probably should have given him a break. He was probably making peanuts, but we just didn't want to run for him. So we said, hey, let's train on our own. Let's run a marathon. I don't think we really knew like how far a marathon was. I know we didn't train like we were going to run for a marathon, but we did. So I ran the Cleveland Marathon in 1979 at age 15. There I am in my falling down tube socks. I think those are New Balance. Form's pretty good still, right? I got the peace sign going. Few things about the marathon. And I have the brochures here. Cost $5 to get in, okay? The age divisions are crazy. You could do the marathon at 14 and under. They didn't care. There were only 4 divisions for women, 19 and under, and then 40 and over were the two ends. Awards. You know what you used to get? A watch. You could win a watch. The fuel was Body Punch. Does anyone remember? Don, do you remember Body Punch? Yeah, that was before Gatorade, I think, or they got it cheaper for some reason. Pets, this was an interesting one. They talked about pets on the course. Horses, dogs, and cats have no place on the race course. The expo speakers, and this is kind of for Craig Idema, George Sheehan, yeah, and Dick Burkle, who was a '76 Olympian. I don't remember going to hear him talk, but I probably should have. Well, turns out the marathon did not go well for me. They did have computerized results, which apparently was big at the time, and I did find them, and I finished in 4 hours, 27 minutes, and 40 seconds, along with like 6 other people because they were rounding times to 10 seconds. And I finished in front of about 75 people who were given the same time at 4 hours and 36 minutes, all the same time. So not sure what was going on there, but I do remember a little bit about the race, taking off at like 6-minute pace, eating some oranges. At one point I was running next to a guy carrying a giant boombox as he was running, stopping at some point, waiting for the sag wagon, deciding the sag wagon wasn't coming quick enough, and walked jogging to the finish. That's what I remember. I did it again 2 years later. I was in track at the time, so I'm sure my coach wasn't happy about that, but I DNF'd that time. And the DNF is related to a story, and you know, for those of you who don't know much about the Boston Marathon, this is the race director, the director of the marathon course in Boston. His name is Dave McGillivray, and he has a really heartwarming story, way better than a story that I could tell about me. So I want to share it with you. So when Dave was 17, he was reading through the Boston Globe, and he was reading about the Boston Marathon. And it went near his house, and he said, I'm doing that. Sounds like something cool to do. So he gets his brother to drive him to the start. He got a friend who was a fellow runner, give him a race bib number from a race he had run like the week before. Okay, so he was a bandit, basically. He just put a number on, thought that'd be fine. And then the last thing he did before he started was he called his grandfather. Okay, and his grandfather lived along the course, but kind of near Coolidge Corner, which is at mile 22 of the Boston course. And his grandfather said, yeah, I'll walk out there and I'll wait for you and cheer you on as you go through. Okay, so Dave starts the race. The farthest he'd run up to that point was 11 miles or something like that. Makes it to 18 miles. 18 miles, he's just shot. He can't go on. Okay? He sits down on the side of the road, takes his shoes off. They're kind of bloody because he didn't wear socks. He didn't know any better. And policeman sees him, says, oh, you're in rough shape, puts him in a squad car, takes him to the hospital. And eventually, Dave got back home, and he's trying to call his grandfather, like to tell him, 5 o'clock, no answer, 6 o'clock, no answer. There was no cell phones back then, guys. 7 o'clock, finally, his grandfather picks up the phone and says, oh, yeah, I waited waited till the last runner came, waited till the sag wagon came through. And then I went back. And Dave felt, super bad. He'd let his grandfather down. His grandfather said, look, I'll make a deal with you. Next year, you train. Okay, this year you didn't do any training. Next year you train, and I'll be here for you. I'll be cheering you on. His grandfather died of a heart attack 2 months later on the train. To honor his memory, Dave's going to do it. He started running 100-mile weeks. Okay? He's in the best shape of his life that following year. The day before the marathon, he gets a stomach flu. Okay? His parents said, you shouldn't do it. Just let it go, do it again next year. But, they were good enough or wanted to honor the wishes of Dave, and Dave said, I got to do it. No matter how much it hurts, I'm going to do it. So, goes into the race, just feeling awful. It's hard. Every step is hard. Makes it to 18 miles, where he stopped before. Keeps going, makes it to 21 miles, but by now he can't go on. And sits down on the side of the course, kind of crawls up on the sidewalk, and doesn't really know where he is. And he kind of looks up, and he's got his hand on this iron fence, and it's Evergreen Cemetery, which is the place where his grandfather was buried 9 months before. And he thought, my God, he said he was going to be there to the day, on this day. And there he is, inspiring me. And so Dave said, I made a commitment at that point that I'm going to do this. And this man has run over 50 Boston Marathons in a row. And he did it for a long time up until this year after the race was done, because he was working during the race. Another reason why this guy is special to me is this is a former student of mine, Caitlin Presti. Her dream job was to work at Walt Disney World as a race director. Okay? She is in Orlando as a race director. She works occasionally with Dave, and this is them at the Olympic trials. I see her maybe every other year at Boston, because she usually runs for charity. So, you can ask me in the question section about 20 years that passed since, high school. But suffice it to say, I did keep running. I got into bike racing, triathlons. I worked. I did some more marathons, went back to school. Here I am in Madison. This is my exercise lab. That's I'm an exercise physiologist. And then I met this girl named Annie. She's over here, second row here. She's probably gonna cry. So Annie and I had just gotten engaged or somewhere around there, thinking about it. But she was finishing her degree. I was still working on mine. She was done. And she had found a postdoc, which is what they have you do when you get a lot of training, but they still don't want to pay you, so they have you do something else, at Tufts University. Tufts is in Boston. And we thought, oh, Boston Marathon, we got to run a marathon. We both ran at Madison, brutally hot day, 80-degree day. I do remember ending up in the medical tent, but qualified for Boston. I think, you know, I'm young here, 30, whatever, yeah. Under 3 hours, made it, Annie qualified, and so we were set. Okay, I was going to use going out to see Annie in Boston as a vacation, get to run the Boston Marathon for the first time. There's the pictures, the only pictures I have of my first Boston. If you do it, buy the photos, okay? We were so poor back then that, no, I wasn't going to pay the money, okay? Annie, I think, took these probably. There I am. But yeah, so I did it. My friend Eric did it with me. And I moved out to Boston in the next year. We and Annie and I were professors in residence at Metcalf Hall at Boston. And so another excuse to do the Boston Marathon. We had just gotten married, and so we did it. And, you know, honestly, that probably would have been it, you know, for me, were it not for moving to Point and getting on the Buck Rut bus. All right? I don't know, you can look through the photos here and find yourself, some of you in there. But so I was introduced by Leanne Larson to this sort of group. She said there's a group, they run, there's this guy, he's going to have a bus, they're going to go up to Minocqua, do a race. Do you and Annie want to come? Heck yeah, I'll do it. And on that bus, I met this gentleman, okay, who's in the back there, Tom Jensen, pre, and he could probably tell the story better than me, but I get on the bus and there's this guy walking down the aisles, you know, directing things, talking. He starts talking to me, and I remember saying to him, I don't think I've ever met anyone quite like you. And there is no one quite like him, okay? This is, I mean, you guys might recognize some people in here, right? Here's Chris Zielinski. I don't know who this guy could be, right? And I don't know what you're doing. You might be on a flip phone or whatever. You know, Tom's son Luke there. But yeah, that's his Club Med, okay? And that's pre and all the runners, that's what I got involved with. And some of them were running 10Ks, some were training for marathons. And so we ran, you know, we ran every Wednesday, every Saturday. This is my 25 years of Boston. Don't count the snapshots, because back in the early age, computers weren't really a thing, and they didn't send you electronic photos. They sent you in the mail proofs of your pictures. I don't know where they are. Okay, Annie knows I'm very organized, okay, but they're gone. Anyway, here's the races. Most are just me alone, but I love this one here, John Novak, Kyle, and John sent me this photo. And the reason he sent me it was because he said, look, you're in the lead here. This is halfway, and I'm behind you, but this was our finishing times. So he was kind of giving it to me. One other thing, famous Citgo sign. This was 2013. And I don't know how many of you have watched the Boston bombing documentary. That's where one of the bombs blew up. Okay, that's the near one, right? Those flags right there. Here's the other ones. Hot days, cold days, 2018. Okay, virtual. Okay. Yeah. Oh, fall. That was the fall one after COVID. And that brings me to this year in 25. First year I put my name, and I drew it with a Sharpie. I put Tom on the back. It said 25 Boston, Stevens Point, Wisconsin. Best thing I ever did, okay? You have no idea. I heard the whole race, all 3.5 hours of it. Tom, go! And then from runners saying, hey, go Wisconsin. I'm from Milwaukee. Good job on the 25. The whole way. Why that was so important is I pulled my hamstring a half mile into the race. I mean, there's a picture out there with this, it bled the next few days down into my knee. I was hurt. But when you have people yelling at you, okay, you don't think about that, okay? It went away. So Boston number 25, loved it, quarter century club, but it was really bittersweet, okay? And it was bittersweet because someone was missing. When Eli was in high school, at some point we were kind of doing the math and figured, oh, he'll be in college, he'll be, 20, he'll be able to run a marathon. He could run his first. He could qualify, then run his first Boston when I run my 25th. And he did qualify. Okay, he and Annie ran the Napa Valley Marathon the year before. He ran a 2:55 in his first marathon and qualified by 5 minutes. Time cutoff was 7 minutes. Okay, so he missed it. He actually missed it by like 90 seconds or something like that. Because now you have to run faster than your qualifying time. He was okay with it. He had asked me afterwards, is 5 minutes enough? I said, yeah, the last couple years there was no time cut off. So I felt bad, He probably could have run another one. Who felt furious was Craig Idema. Like, Craig was all over. He was like, how can this happen? So, didn't get to run with my son, and that's my Boston story so far. Do I keep going? Well, here's where I need John Ferrone, his expertise here. So I like reading. I like literature, poems. Tennyson created a 70-verse, 70-line poem called Ulysses that kind of speaks to me. I am a part of all that I have met. We are who we are because of our experiences. Old age hath yet his honor and toil. Some noble note might yet be done. And you guys know this probably from the James Bond movie, right? And you could probably recite the last few stanzas here. Moved earth and heaven, that which we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts made weak by time and fate, but strong in will. To seek, to strive, and not to yield. So, you know how old Tennyson was when he wrote this? He was 24. And it was about his friend who had died when he was 22, which is crazy. Dylan Thomas, right? Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. So, do I follow in the footsteps of Johnny Kelly? This is Johnny Kelly the Elder. He won the race. This is 1935, I think. His last one was when he was 84. Okay, he ran Boston 61 times, finished 58. There's his records here, his times. They made a statue of him that's kind of at the base of Heartbreak Hill. And I got to see him, meet him, hear him in Athletes Village at Boston. This is 2002. And what he would do is he'd go to the Athletes Village while you're all waiting to start, and he'd get up on the stage and he would sing Young at Heart. Okay? It was just amazing. I have an autographed book by him. He's my hero. He's my hero. I'm comparing myself to Johnny. Here's my physiology part. Okay, Johnny's in blue. I'm in red. Okay, I got a ways to go. Yes, math people might note I've put a linear line through my points. It's probably not going to be linear. All right, it's going to go polynomial at some point. I did beat him 1 year. He must have had a really bad year that year. But yeah, he won 2 times, finished second 7 times. He's a legend. So maybe I will keep going. There's a good story by George Sheehan. Again, Craig and me, like, he's our favorite guy. And George Sheehan would talk about, there was this Greek guy in ancient times who asked his grandfather's ghost for some kind of mission, what he should do. And the ghost said, do what you can, my child. And the Greek guy said, oh man, get me something more difficult. Give me something more Cretan. And so the ghost thunders, reach for what you cannot. And George Sheehan said, man, I should put that on a t-shirt. There's no better message for a marathoner than reaching for what you can't. Johnny Kelly the Younger said this, I often wonder why runners could accomplish what they did. It's like analyzing love or passion. Why I had to run remains one of the mysteries of my life. And I think if you're a runner, you might feel that way. I know I do. But probably biggest reason why I keep running, and I love Bruce Springsteen. Some guys, they just give up living, start dying little by little, piece by piece. Some guys come home from work and wash up and go racing in the street. He was probably talking about cars. We put on our shoes and we go running. Okay, so the title of the presentation, right? I'm with James here at the expo. This is Saturday morning or something. And I'm like, this year I got to take a lot of pictures because I got this presentation. Okay? I never take pictures. James, stand in front of that kind of poster that has the cities that the course goes through. I'll take a picture. So I do. Get home later that night. I'm flipping through my phone, looking at my pictures, and I look at it again. Okay? And I'm like, literally, Jiminy Crickets. Like, I didn't even see that when I was taking the picture. And so the next morning, got everyone there, almost everyone as best I could, and there we are in front of the sign. Okay? And I think it's self-explanatory. This coat here, special to me. One of the things I never did was bought a jacket. 25 years, no jacket. I said maybe on my 25th, but then I kind of backed down. It's like, I don't need that. I don't need a jacket. Joe here finds a jacket from 2000. Okay, the first year I did it, gets it embroidered with all the years I did it, gives it to me the night before. So pretty cool to have friends like that. So I got to thank a few people. This lady especially, she lets me do whatever the hell I want to do. Okay? I think because she wants me to get out. But hey, sometimes she's there with me. Okay? And I love her to death. I got to thank my friend Eric. Okay, he did the first one with me. Maybe he'll do another one with me. He's 10 years younger than me. He's having a hard time qualifying. What I think is hilarious about this photo, hey, this was at the expo in 2000. Here's one of the guys they brought to run, paid to bring, a Kenyan or Ethiopian. It's so hot in the expo. Okay? He's wearing a down jacket. All right. These two guys. Okay? When I just got here, those were the guys I looked up to as a runner getting older but still giving it their all. Okay? Club Men guys. Okay? A bunch of these guys aren't here. I think Bill's here, the only one. Oh, and Tim's here. Here's Rem here. He's not here. All these guys are really special to me. Hey, Tom used to say, I don't know, do you remember saying this? Yeah, we're the lucky ones. He would say it usually on a bitter ass cold run, and there's people driving by kind of looking at their windows at us. He'd say, man, we're the lucky ones. We are. We are so lucky. I am so lucky to have all these people around me, okay, to share in this. All right, you were waiting for this, right? You remember the story? Dad and the son eating breakfast? So, commitment, contribution. The dad thinks about it for a while. He says, son, look down at your plate. What do you see? Son says, well, it's ham and eggs. And the dad says, that chicken made a contribution to your breakfast. That pig made a commitment. So this story was originally about some Dartmouth rowing coach who used this as kind of a psych up for his rowing team, you know, going into a competition. I think for you guys, you know, if you're a runner or if you're passionate about anything else, maybe and you have a competition and you got your team there like I got my team, and you need a little extra boost of energy, you might think about that saying and think about running like a pig. So, thank you. Thank Boston. Thank you. And I hope you can be a lucky one and be nice. Thank you. Okay, now I do know I went over, but if anyone wants in the question area, I do have a one-page love letter written to the club. So I can read that. Probably take 2 minutes, but I won't if no one wants it.
I want you to read it.
Should I read it? Okay, all right. All right. This is called the Run Club. There was the Buckrut bus and the bus to Cross Country Nationals, Pavo weekend in Pittsville on July the 4th, Bellin and Frostbite, Roshold on Labor Day, Old Colonels, the Wellness Run with Susie Favor, Jay and Judy's Big O Plain Run, and of course, Point Bach Run. There was Never Summer, never finished, Berkey Trail Relay where the old guys dominated, the all-night Whip-Assin Run, and of course, Pre's New Year's Day Run, and seeing who would be inducted on the wall. There were noontime runs from UWSP, Wednesday night summer runs followed by sitting outside Arbuckles, Saturday morning runs in sub-zero temperatures and warming up in front of a wood stove in Club Men. Track workouts in winter on the indoor track where Pre would give us workouts from some great runner and where Solinsky ran a 4-minute low mile just to see how fast he could go. Lake Emily runs or Sunset Lake followed by donut holes and a dip in the cool water. Hammering down Forest Street in the dark, trying to avoid the city bus or a loose goat. The airport loop, where we would push each other to sub-6-minute miles. Sewer to sewer, too many times to count. And run from Club Men to T-Bucks in a blizzard where John's cooler of drinks got stolen. And then the time someone pooped on the bottles he left at the corner of Highway T. Fall Standing Rocks runs, followed by yelling for the Spash Cross Country team and wishing that we were 17 again. Running to Zadge's and having Sid lick all the salt from her legs. There were fines from falling and injuries and comebacks and occasional PRs as well. There was some talk about less is more. I never bought that. More is always better. Leading up to Boston, there was the 4x4x4 around the Casimir Loop, Jasper's Meteogram, and the Marathon Time Prediction Contest. The race and heat or cold or wind or rain, maybe you ended up in the hospital, Scott Gralla, but hopefully you made it through the Wellesley Scream Tunnel before you did. The night after Boston, lots of walking, bar to bar, Guinness or two, blueberry beer, and clam chowder. The Wednesday after, when you would hobble as best you could through Schmeekly for the group run, just so you could earn a beer. There was the re-roofing of Club Men, the drywalling of Ducko's garage, digging a basement and cable, births, weddings, grandkids' funerals, Pre's run at Pavo, and a wolf dog that ran 5 miles with us. Psycho trying to hand off the baton to one of us because he thought he was going too slow. Rem taking down a young hop at Old Colonel's. or drinking Red Bulls before Boston. T-Buck's fix for all running injuries, a small piece of cardboard in the shoe. Bill and I setting the Masters relay marathon record at Pavo, each of us having run the more difficult half. And then Bill resting on his laurels. Ducko telling us he was retiring from running at least 5 times, only to show up again to run the week later. And no, I did not forget it. At the end of the year, without fail, there was the Christmas Eve morning run from T-Bucks. Running or walking, telling stories, making plans, a shot of Jameson, and washing it down with some eggnog and hugs from friends. Pre used to say to the group, "We are the lucky ones." It is something I absolutely believe. I'm especially lucky and grateful and blessed to have known such a good group of people. Old stories are like old friends. You have to visit them from time to time. That's from Game of Thrones Season 2. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys for sticking around. Thank you, speakers, all 3 of you. Can we give them another round of applause for sharing? From who's left in this room, it sounds like there's a lot of connections. Can we see a show of hands who's ever been to Boston, whether you participated, volunteered, or just went to the marathon to watch? It's a pretty good percentage of people here. That's wonderful. Give it up for them. All right, so we do have some time left for question and answer, I believe. All right. If I can have the speakers come up here, I'm going to have you stand. If you want to come stand in a line over here. Okay, that's perfect. If anybody wants to kick it off with a question, just raise your hand. Once you say it, I will repeat it into the mic for the people online to hear it. I saw your hand first.
Tom, how many marathons have you run?
Tom, how many total marathons have you run?
Somewhere in the upper 50s. Yeah. Kind of depends what you count. I've done some Ironman that has a marathon in it, but yeah.
No big deal. No big deal. Other questions? All right, I have a couple prepared. Go ahead.
How many books did you sell about?
We're on our second printing. I think it's about 8,000.
Got to say that again. How many books have you
We're on
sold?
our second printing. We've sold about 8,000.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Go ahead.
I don't have a question. I just want to say something that maybe supports what was said about running where you are, not where you want to be. When I was doing Boston this last year, there was somebody running in front of me for a while, and her T-shirt on the back said, "This is why I'm here." And over the past 6 years, she listed where she did a marathon and what her time was. And her first one was 5 hours and something. And then her second one was 4 hours and something. And then slowly whittled down to, then she qualified. So she did it. Took a few years, but she did it.
Testament to commitment and repetition and discipline. Other questions? Raise your hand. Go ahead.
As both fathers and coaches, how do you instill the love and passion for the lifelong sport of running versus allowing that next generation to burn out?
As fathers and runners, how do you instill, one more time?
The lifelong passion for running.
The lifelong passion for running instead of allowing burnout.
The most important thing is you can't force people to run. You can't twist their arm. You can only encourage them to give it a try. And with my daughter, the rule was that she would run with me as long as I could tell her a running story. Fortunately, I have several thousand of them, so we did many, many runs together. And the other thing is that as coaches, Kevin and I know this very, very well, is we don't push kids at a very early age. We're not trying to, Kevin said this last year, we're not trying to make the best 7th graders in the country. We're trying to make sure that they're some of the best 12th graders when they get to that point.
I think with my son Eli, obviously Eli grew up knowing I was a big runner. I don't know if that influenced his decision to run, but one of the things I think Annie and I both did was we were definitely not helicopter parents. We didn't go to Taekwondo practices. We didn't go to all his meets. We let him be very independent, and he was, because I didn't want to pressure him. I didn't want him to feel any pressure. Now, eventually I did go to meets and things, but I wanted him to be doing it because he wanted to.
I play a lot of cars with our boys right now, and it's awesome.
Went really fast.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
Tom, how many people do you have signed up to go to the Comrades Marathon with you?
Tom, how many people are signed up to go to Comrades Marathon with you?
Okay, well, we don't have Annie. I've mentioned it to a few people, but yeah, Annie and I are hoping to do Comrades next year. So, yeah, I know Alvin's sort of from the area, and we're gonna look to him. So if there's people that want to do that, Comrades is it's like how far?
72.
72K, which is miles. Don't know. Yeah.
40?
I was born maybe.
Yeah, it's more than a marathon. So you get more for your money, so I think it'll be good. Yeah, really looking forward to that.
It's in South Africa.
It's in South Africa, yep.
Do you have any history of it, what it is?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I've never done it. But yeah, it's one of the most famous ultra-distance marathons. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So then how many ultra marathons have you done?
How many ultra marathons have you done?
I don't keep track of things like that, but it's not as many as marathons. But yeah, so one of my goals is to do a 100-miler. I've done 100K. My weakness is my stomach. So if like Dan Griffin, who has an amazing stomach, and my like mitochondria could be combined, we would be unstoppable. But he can eat, I can't eat, and that's hard to do in a 100-miler. So, yeah, but one day I will.
Have either of you done an ultramarathon?
Any interest in the Barkley Marathon?
Any interest in the Barkley Marathon?
No, Barclays is a little too extreme for me. Yeah, I'll probably just stick with Boston.
Yeah.
If you don't know what the Barkley Marathon is, go to YouTube and just type in Barkley's Marathon, the race that eats its young, and watch that documentary, and you'll be like, who would ever do this?
It's amazing.
It's a really great documentary.
It's one of the best running documentaries. It shows a lot of, again, discipline, perseverance, and the people who do that event apply it to that event, but people who just start running for their first 5K, for their first half, for their first full, it's the same level of discipline and perseverance that gets put into it. So it's a really great doc. Okay, I'm gonna read one. Okay, we got one more. How do you believe the discipline of running has helped you in other aspects of your life?
I'll happily go first so I don't have to follow their responses. I'm new to the running community. I started in college, so I've only been running for about 10 years now. But it's really been the people that I've met through running, and like similar to all of the stories you have, like the memories that are being made with the friends that I have, that I run in the mornings super early at 5:15, and they drive to my house from a half hour away just to run together and drink some coffee. It's kind of silly. And it's the people that you meet, the stuff you talk about along the way. That's what it's been about.
Yeah, I don't really want to answer that question, but one thing I would like to say is that sometimes people look at me and they say, oh, running must be easy for you. And it's not. It is sometimes, and I love it, but it's hard sometimes. I mean, my wife knows when I wake up in the morning, I grunt and groan for a good half hour. I have a bad back. But yeah, I do think running gives you discipline. Or maybe disciplined people are runners. I don't know. I don't know which comes first. But I think maybe it carries over in life. It can't hurt.
I was a 14-year-old high school sophomore when I started running. I was a true idiot, a complete lost soul, and I was fortunate that I fell into this group of great young men and a wonderful coach who inspired me to work hard. I was a terrible student. I pulled out a report card and I took a picture of it from when I was a junior in high school. I had a 1.588. And I sent that picture to my sister, who has 7 grandkids, and said, file this away, because if any one of those 7 has a bad report card, think about this. And send it to my nieces and tell them, don't give up on that kid. He may be okay. There might be a good person in there someplace. I didn't know where it was. I didn't see it. I didn't know it. And my coach encouraged me to go to college. I ended up here, as I said earlier. And that made all the difference in the world. That the fact that I had the one person that seemed to believe in me, encourage me. And before my senior year of high school, I was running 100-mile weeks. I was still 16 at the time, a 16-year-old senior, hadn't turned 17 yet, training at 100 miles a week, and I was a 4:48 miler. None of that makes any sense. But I was inspired, and I learned to be tough, and I learned to be disciplined. I wish I could recapture some of that discipline in my life and exercise a little more, eat a little less. But there was a time when I was an incredibly dedicated high school kid, and it helped get me through college, and it wasn't easy there either. And it got me through a teaching career and a coaching career, and I ended up writing a book, which has done pretty well, as Tom asked. And my life has been far more than I ever imagined, and I've told guys on the team that. Tate's heard me say this a number of times, because he was a bit of an idiot, although a much smarter idiot than I was. So, and I say that in the very nicest possible way. You know that. I love you guys. So.
All right, one more time, let's thank our speakers for everything they've shared. All right, I believe our speakers are going to hang around out here for just a little bit longer if you have further questions or want to talk to them. We also have all of our vendors still outside: YMCA, Girls on the Run, Wonderful Water Run, Pineries Running Lab, Nike, Central Wisconsin Running, Ranger Rock, Point Bach Run, Iron Bowl, and again, one more big thank you to the UWSP School of Health, Science, and Wellness for this.